Hey, how's everybody doing? I am Tomlin's Novak, and we are here 365 days towards racial change, talking about black issues, how race impacts our lives in America. Um, try to have the thought, try to progress a little in your thinking because we don't want to just rest on this polarization. It's a derived polarization around skin color. Yes, in the past I've been probably pretty polarized myself because those are the elements of the scenario, the play that's being lived out in the world. The darker skin color, um, less access you have, or there's a correlation between access to wealth and resources of the world, right? This is not just an American phenomenon. Also, we do recognize there are other people where there's a more homogeneous uh, demonstration of skin color. There's not a whole lot of shades and things like that. But even those people find a reason to discriminate and disadvantage um, people of their same skin color, their same group. You know, um, I wouldn't. I look at um, I look at Jews versus white people. They all look the same to me. They look like a bunch of white people. Jews may have uh, a tone or tint more common, more readily available than white people proper, Northern European folk, but they all kind of look the same to me. Uh, but I don't want to get into that subject. We've crossed that. Just remember, we're the things we talk about here as we begin to wrap this project up in the next 2-3 months worth of posts. Is that think of racial change as having come a space, a journey where we understand that race, color of skin, it's just a covering, pardon the pun and usage there, of a deeper systemic argument, and it's about power groups, power and control, how one man or woman or group wants to disadvantage another man, woman, or group. What I want to talk about, though, briefly today before we get to story time, Uncle Tom's Cabin, is our president is impeached. Now these videos are no longer by the day, and it actually the project's going to spill over into 2020. Um, so if you feel like, wait, I've been watching this every day, and now there's a leap in history and time, you're right. You're not going crazy. School came in and stuff. That's another long story. But I want to talk about, our president is impeached. The country's in sad shape. You know, let me talk about just a couple things briefly. You look at 9/11 or any act, big momentous act against the United States or a threat against us, and the United States collectively uh, just goes into overkill mode. Now the 9/11 thing, I think that prompted some very appropriate maneuvers, TSA, that adjusted surveillance laws and things like that. But, we push back, and it appears to be such a victory against the impact of 9/11. But you see these acts, how they form new industries, a new level of paranoia um, with folks in the land, and it's very troublesome, right? You know, the hijackers of 9/11 are dead. We hung Saddam Hussein. We can drone strike and capture and then kill off people almost at will from a laptop here in the United States and whatnot. But the impact of the terrorists just is ongoing. It's a subtle adjustment, you know. I'm wondering, see if their act, if their demonstration caused this much upheaval, turmoil in the United States, was their demonstration of failure or victory? If the United States can be manipulated thus and so. So with this impeachment thing, you know, you look at, we were worried about Russian intervention, Ukraine election tampering came up, and a host of others that I'm sure the United States is paranoid about, maybe rightfully so. But you know, even our intelligence agencies has given us some evidence to be secure that different agencies around the world are infiltrating and hacking and dumping and all these internet words that we have to, internet language that continues to evolve, gets applied to the United States. Well, what you have is now, you know, whether or not Russia, Ukraine, China tampered and Facebooked and tweeted, whether they did it or not, it doesn't matter, because you see the United States going through these adjustments and these changes. You know, myth or fact doesn't even matter. We ramping it up. We've got to look like this confused, frenzied beast on the planet to some of these other nations uh, who are doing their due diligence but are not as tight. You know, United States, we got problems, and it's exacerbating and steamrolling. What I end with this before we get into the material is it's really sad. See, because when I was a boy and I'm sitting in the classroom, all these little things they conditioned me with, I didn't realize were conditioning at the time, but all the things they were doing, teaching equality and all this crap, you know. And now we got the leader of the Senate saying that he is going to take direction from the executive branch. I mean, you got the legislative, you got the executive, you got the judicial branches. Grade school education said these three organizations in the United States were separate, and that they would jostle, um, you know, in their jostling and you know, maneuvering, we would have a nation led by a constitution, a document, oldest one on the planet, right? And when the legislative branch says it's taking its uh, direction from the executive branch, you realize we've gone from three branches to two, right? And the guys that have teamed up are pretty powerful. You know, when are they going to, like their judicial branch? We say, oh, that's like the referee. You know, when the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, speaks, you listen and you do what it says, right? In the context of sharing power and such, I don't see that. Like, I mean, this guy, the senator, Mitch McConnell, we all know, he's violating elementary school education about the three branches of government when he says uh, he's a servant of the executive branch. We man, have we blurred the lines, right? And so racial change, part of it is, if you're feeling like um, you've invested, you believed in the system, because it did teach you that. If you had the same public education I did and you're of a skin color, not white, then you probably are conditioned to believe from a very early age that this was an inclusive, colorblind system where you have access. And you see representation, and we have billionaire black people and entertainers and stuff. You got, and if you're going through a period of disillusionment, welcome home. Welcome home. And I'm going to introduce you to a guy that can articulate these things a lot better than I can. But yeah, you know, well, like, I hate to say it, America needs a timeout. We're over here, over there, and we're fighting in-house. We're getting too busy, and something's going to get missed. I just got back from the supermarket, and I got too busy, and I forgot a condiment. Darn it. I was too busy. I was looking for this and that, and I had my thing, my music, and everything was going on. And I forgot one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, the darn condiment. America, you got to slow down. You got to take it down a notch. We are moving at a feverish pace. We're going to miss something, and there may be dire consequences to that. I'm Tomlin's Nybeck. Hey, day 276. Let's knock it out. Doing a two-parter here. 276 will be part one. 277 will be part two, the victory. And so Uncle Tom's Cabin. But before we get to that, I want to let you know I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. He talks about power groups, essentially white folks, and how, white folks can't even hear themselves. The power group, essentially. And this is white and black. Anybody can be in the power group. Just so happens the power group is majority white. And you'll see this as well. I've noticed when I'm watching CNN and everything, power gets more white as you go along in the United States. I don't think we don't even have that conversation. We don't even discuss it. That's the conversation we need to have. What's the black mind, or the mind of the disadvantaged group? Are we critiquing, understanding what it is we're seeing and hearing, and how from even as far back as James Madison's notes, 1787, you had these white men sitting around making policies, changing the course of history and the world, and they're not representing all of us, not in the least. That's another discussion. There's 365 chances to hit on something that may resonate with you. 365. Dr. Claude Anderson speaks about these issues much more better eloquently than I can. Get his books. I'll tell you where to get them in a second. A Black History Reader. 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. The disparities, the differences between blacks and whites in America, some historical background in there as well. And Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com and other places. He's getting active again on YouTube. I'm glad he's trying to be more active. If I understand well, he's had some recent physical challenges. Give him a shout out. You tell him Tomlin's Nyback sent you to him. Behind me, you'll see the hashtag #us2 symbol and black women there having their community resources, support, very important. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, for kind of a black Facebook experience. If you have a business mind, you can check out Dr. Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School. I just occasionally give him a shout out. He's a good dude, sincere, vulnerable. Sometimes he gets burned. So I'll give him some free press and publicity for anybody who might be watching. And finally, we are now still in story time. We're just going to hang out. It's casual. It is the holidays, and this will spill over into 2020. Trying to get as much done before I go back to school in January. We'll see. Uncle Tom's Cabin story time. Doing a two-parter. We've had a couple of these throughout the year. Today, 276, chapter 38. It's called The Victory. We're back to Tom and his commitment to Jesus. Me and Dr. Anderson, to a degree, have some issue with this, the way religion is used and employed to manipulate black folks, slaves in America. I personally believe in the truth of the Protestant arm of Christianity and faith in the world. So while it can be manipulated, I've been in circles even in modern day where I've been manipulated because the Word of God says. I got my mind right now, and I'm not readily a victim of that kind of foolishness. But there is a truth there, even if it's used poorly, right? The surgeon has a sharp instrument. He can fillet you and terminate your life or bring healing, right? That's the Word of God to me in my life. Tom has this same commitment. Maybe he doesn't have the same convictions or knowledge, understandings, but his faith is strong in that. His faith goes beyond intellect and wisdom and things like that. He's trusting this theology, and it's in Legree's face. There's a lot of conflict now and upheaval on Legree's plantation because Tom has something that gives Tom some ownership, and Legree can't tolerate that. Power cannot tolerate independence and seeing someone else exercise, enjoy the same privileges that power has. Power doesn't like that. There's a lot of things you can get power riled up about, but if you really want to push power's button, be independent, be self-determining, and power, you're going to get some backlash, and it's not going to make any sense. That's what Tom's dealing with, Legree's dealing with. It's the height of the harvest. They're trying to bring in the cotton. Legree has instituted a 7-day work week. I'm in a seasonal thing right now where it's not uncommon to have a 7-day work week. Really tears up the body. They try to compensate us with a little more money. I don't think maybe we break even on that, but I'm sure on Legree's plantation, You didn't break even. Your body was spent. Tom never fully recovers from the beatings and this conditioning through torture and terrorism employed by Simon Legree. He's using Sambo and Quimbo to beat Tom in the evenings and harass him. So Tom's sleep is brief at best and restless, and he's back in the field the next day. Um, Tom is full of faith, we would say, but he still has to fend off despair. You know, even Jesus had his moment. I've heard a lot of creative sermons about Jesus' moment in the Garden of Gethsemane and the convictions and the things he's got to do mentally to kind of get it and keep it together. Tom is no different. He has to be encouraged and stuff like that. Legree shows up berating Tom, cursing Tom's God, and all this. And Legree is like, short of killing Tom, he says, all this confusion and issues, pressure could be over um, if you just accept the way I want things on my plantation. Take my alcohol. I want to make you, give you power and privilege above Sambo and Quimbo. Legree kind of indicates, because in the end, Legree says God will not help you. In Tom's despair and suffering and all this, and faith, he comes to that peace, kind of that passes all understanding. You can find that, all through, well, actually, all through the Bible. I hope I'm not beating you too much with the Bible. It's just Harriet Beecher Stowe has really inserted faith in the text. I think she uses it well in the text. So Tom has the peace that passes all understanding. Paul had it. Jesus attained it. The Old Testament folks had it. That the circumstances have not gotten better. They may get worse. It doesn't matter. They are at peace in their understanding of God, relationship with God, interaction with God. There's something real, a spark of faith is now gone internal. It's been a seed, now it's bearing fruit. And Tom has his breaking point on this issue. In the Greek thinking, and we won't claim that slavery America was educated enough to really lay hold of some of the doctrines of Greek thinkers. But I just had a semester, and Aristotle, pupil of Plato, had some commentary on slaves, and because slaves have been all through time, and Aristotle kind of indicates the slave is born to be a slave. Slave is incapable of participating in the power system. And so Aristotle, his commentary on slaves is that the slave is a slave by birth naturally and needs to be governed and controlled and stuff like that, which is not true. Not true at all. I maybe someday I could write some commentary that you, and I've indicated this in the year, I think, you had the coming together of two very different ideologies and approaches to life and relationship with the land. You find indigenous people, Native American, Aborigines, blacks in Africa, anywhere you go, there's a relationship with the land. There's the idea, technology is very slow and maybe things like that, but there's a relationship with your land. You don't go forcing the land to be something and digging and scratching it and taking resources, enslaving others sometimes, you know, uh, to get the resources so you could be rich. You know, the indigenous people, they had a paradise type of existence, relationship with the land. They listened to the land. The land was an educator. Not so for the Europeans. Everything was conquest, exploitation, domination, enslavement, right? And when these two met, the the white system, the power system, essentially white, we'll say all of Europe, which includes Spain, Portugal, southern portions, Mediterranean folk, you know, exploited, controlled, you know, uh, compelled labor to submit to its rule, right? So that's Aristotle's. He's looking at this and says, "Oh, the slave was meant to be a slave," and blah blah blah. But he's totally dismissing that you got a class. There's a clash of cultures, and the people wielding bows, arrows, spears, you know, increasing technology and weaponry and warfare were overcoming and enslaving these people. You know, also another point is that the indigenous folk, they just didn't have the same education, values, um, and opportunities to participate in the power system as their oppressors. So that was another problem too. So Aristotle's argument on slavery is very weak. When you really take it apart and see the players in his scenario. Um, Slavery was just a sick blind spot. I think that's America's problem. I tell you, if America stopped and said, you know what, stop everything, politics, Russia stuff, all you guys warring, do whatever. We need to clean house. We need to do right by the people we've historically oppressed, abused, disadvantaged, and marginalized. We need transparency, utter transparency. Again, all this top secret, there's nothing top secret. That's my tax money. What do you mean top secret? What's going on? How do you know that uh, that's a stay-at-home dad has nothing to contribute to national security? Forget how complicated you've made it, right? So that's a problem. So this this issue of slavery, domination, marginalization, all this stuff, it's coming to the head here on Simon Legree's plantation. We're seeing it play out, where the disadvantaged folk might have a better relationship with God than the power group who is going to force um, their needs and wants out of another individual or group, right? It's Tom's Dark Night of the Soul. If you're familiar with some of that language, he overcomes that, and he's reinvigorated. Legree and the rest of the plantation are aghast because Tom is still being beaten. He's still working hard. His life has maybe even gotten worse after this revelation with God and Christ and all these elements of faith coming together for Tom, and nobody can figure it out. There's strange fear going through the camp, but it encourages the other slaves. Um, Tom likes that, actually, as we'll see. We may see later on. But it's important uh, to keep in mind this dynamic going on. This clash between Legree and Tom is just an ongoing systemic clash between the disadvantaged and the power group in America. You know, I say if America wants to overcome its woes and challenges and issues, do right by the disadvantaged group, the black people, and maintain the status of what you said about what you're educated as young people about. Now when we're older, we're seeing how the hypocrisy of it. I'm Tomlin's Nyback. Come back. That was part one. Part two, the victory, tomorrow. Day 276 down, 365 days towards racial change. See you next time. I won't say tomorrow, but we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.